Okay, folks. Sophia Bota here, and once again, I'm joined by a friend of the channel, Aria DiMezzo. What's up, Aria?
Oh, not a whole lot. Just taking it easy today.
I've been wanting to get you on the channel since mid-March for a
It's
particular
been,
reason.
yeah, it's been a busy few months, as you might imagine, but things are finally starting to settle down, so that's good.
Do you want to tell folk what happened? I mean, I have explained it on this channel what happened, but I think it'd be better coming from your own, you know,
Well, I can explain to an
account.
extent what happened, right? So on March the 16th at 6 in the morning, the FBI decided to conduct a no-knock raid on my house.
Can you just explain what a no-knock raid is to
It,
people? Not everyone might not
yeah, it
know.
means they basically assemble out in your yard. They cut your cameras, they cut your internet, and they just assemble. And then they kick in your door or smash in a window or something like that, and they come in, guns pointed. And that's what they did. It's unclear really whether or not it was a no-knock raid or whether it was a no-knock raid by accident, right? Because, well, I mean, clearly it was a no-knock raid, but they may have knocked, but it was 6 o'clock in the morning, and based on where my bed is relative to the door, even if I had been awake, there's no chance I would have heard it. So they did kick in the door, and then they started yelling and screaming for me to come down the stairs. I didn't know what was going on. I had been asleep maybe 2 hours at this point, right? And I went to sleep drunk that night. So that was what I heard, just a lot of yelling and screaming and stuff downstairs. I assumed it was the people who had been out here doing work on my house because I've had some contractors out here. And I just thought, my timeline on what time it was screwed up, that it wasn't 6 o'clock in the morning. So I came running down the stairs wearing just a pair of underwear and a throw blanket, screaming, "Guys, what the F is going on?" And I almost reached the bottom of my stairs when I realized that there were a bunch of people standing there with flashlights and guns pointed at me behind riot shields, telling me, "Aria, stop moving or we will open fire." And that was how I woke up. So I did stop moving. They told me to turn around and put my hands in the air. I turned around, but I refused to put my hands in the air because that was going to cause the throw blanket that I was wearing to fall to the ground. And I wasn't willing to give up my dignity. I wasn't willing to let them force me to give up my dignity. I mean, they could have tackled me and thrown me to the ground and ripped it off me or whatever, but I wasn't going to give it up for them. And I ultimately did it, despite them, repeatedly telling me to. I was firm. I'm not doing that. And finally, they had a female FBI agent approach me, pull my arms down in a way that the throw didn't fall, and handcuff me behind my back. That was how my day started. And that it incidentally was like my first day off from work in probably 3 months.
So, so you got arrested. Well, first of all, no, I'm on the left, right? I'm not a libertarian. Well, let me just make that very clear to the
Sure.
audience, and people who might be watching this because knowing Aria being a libertarian. But to me, at most, and I'm dubious as to whether selling Bitcoin should be illegal at all. I don't think it should be.
Well, it isn't. Bitcoin isn't a crime, right?
No. Sorry, I phrased that wrong. Yeah, it's not, you were selling Bitcoin. Having
Allegedly.
a SWAT team, point guns at you at 6 a.m. in the fucking morning seems a bit overkill to me.
Well, I mean, it's
an
a bit worse than
overreaction.
that because they're not charging me with selling Bitcoin or anything like that. They're charging me with operating an unlicensed business. That is the exact charge. Operating an unlicensed money transmitting business and conspiracy to operate an unlicensed money transmitting business. Now, I don't know how the FBI normally operates, but it seems to me like the charge of running an unlicensed business does not necessarily warrant kicking in someone's door, pointing guns at them, and threatening to shoot them. It's
Well, yeah,
wildly disproportional.
um, it's a white. At most, it's a white collar crime, and usually white collar crimes are not handled this way.
No, they could have showed up at my door at a decent hour and just knocked and served me the search warrant, and they would have achieved exactly the same result. But that's not how they chose to handle it.
No, now
And I got off easy. The Free Talk Live studio over at Leverett Street, they got significantly worse. They got windows smashed out. The FBI flew a drone in. They battered down the front door with the Bearcat. It was a war zone on Leverett Street, completely out of line.
Yeah. And from the off, you see, this is the thing. No matter what people's opinion on this is, I would, particularly trans people, no trans person should be okay with the transphobia you were basically subjected to from the off, because I remember you said that, first of all, they wanted you to dress in front of a male agent.
Yes, they did ultimately force me to get dressed in front of male agents. They did have a female agent escort me, and they asked me repeatedly at every step throughout this, how do you identify, which to me is kind of a fucked up question. I mean, if you have to ask, then ask the question, are you male or female, right? Not how do you identify. How I identify is irrelevant. I'm female, and that's all you need to know. But I was asked this question repeatedly, and I always gave the same answer: female, right? And anyone, if they've been paying attention, if they had done their homework, they would know this. But evidently they didn't. So when I got to the jail, they asked me the same freaking questions, and they didn't know what to do with me. So ultimately, they listed my sex as unknown, which kind of pisses me off. And they kept me in medical because, according to my attorney, they just didn't know what to do with me.
Well, yeah, I remember you telling me about that. And
so I finally got released, and it gets worse. So I finally got released, and looking at the probation terms or whatever, on the last page, there's a handwritten, well, I mean, there's a series of notes that are particular to this exact case that aren't normally release conditions. And in those release conditions, someone in the US government was so hell-bent on not letting me be called she that they scratched out she and her and wrote in they and their instead. And that's publicly available on Recap Report Listener, that the US government went out of their way to not call me she. So I'm going to sue the hell out of them at some point. But first I have to, deal with the charges.
Well, it wasn't just that. The DOJ press release dead named you.
They did, but they also dead named nobody, also known as Rich Paul. And I don't know why they do that, but it didn't appear to be a transphobic thing as much as it appeared to be this is a standard policy thing. But that said, they didn't say Ian Freeman, formerly Ian Bernard. They just left it as Ian Freeman. So it's unclear why they chose to do this with myself and nobody. But they did.
Well, I'm sorry, but they shouldn't dead name you.
Now, I would agree.
And particularly as Biden has, since he got in the White House, has been trying to make a play about being a lot more LGBTQ friendly, and generally I'll give him a thumbs up. But releasing a DOJ press, having a DOJ press release dead naming a trans woman just doesn't seem right to me. So
no, it's not a good look for them. But I mean, they're the government, so they do whatever they want, however they want.
So this has really fucked things up for you. Yet again,
to say the least.
Well, I mean, you were telling me you were planning on having, various surgeries, which you do need to deal with, to combat gender dysphoria.
I was planning on getting breast augmentation surgery, right? But when I went to the hospital to talk to the plastic surgeon, he was like, "Oh no, you have to have a letter from your therapist in order to do this." And I was like, "Well, that's kind of fucked up. I don't have a therapist. Why are you suggesting that because I'm trans, I must have a therapist? That's openly discriminatory." And he responded, "I understand your frustrations. It's just standard procedure within the industry." I was like, "Well, you understand the industry is fucked up then. The industry, they don't ask cis women if they don't ask cis women for a letter from their therapist when cis women go to get breast augmentation surgery. So what does it mean? It's my body. The fuck does it matter to them?" I could understand something that was permanent, like sexual reassignment surgery or something like that. I could understand why they would be less willing to do those type of surgeries, but a breast augmentation surgery is 100% reversible. If I didn't like the result, they could just remove them. So I was going to fly to South Korea or Thailand or somewhere to get them done, or Mexico, wherever, so that I don't have to jump through these legal hoops in order to get the surgery that I've deemed necessary for myself. And obviously now I can't leave the country, so that's not an option.
Yeah.
But I don't like the implication that because I'm trans, I must be mentally ill and I can't make decisions for myself.
Well, even if you could get surgery within the United States, you've had your assets frozen, haven't you? So you can't.
It's unclear because I can't. My internet usage is highly restricted, and I can't do anything related to cryptocurrency. So it's or the Reformed Satanic Church. It's unclear at best, but yes, there is at least like that. There are at least some assets that have been frozen, and other assets that I'm just legally not allowed to use at the moment.
Right, but the thing is, you're being prevented from getting surgeries that you need as a trans woman, right? And
right.
that is to me a violation of fundamental human rights. No doubt about that. So how are you coping?
I'm good. I mean, as good as I can be, considering what's hanging over my head. But worrying about it doesn't do any good. I have a really good attorney who's working hard for me, and the best I can do is just write it out and see what happens. But if they think I'm going to back down from them at any point in this, then I'm not 100% sure they knew what they were getting into, to be honest with you. The only person I've ever met who is as stubborn as I am is Ian Freeman. And he's more stubborn than I am. So neither one of us are going to prove willing to back down on this. I mean, we're going to make them fight every inch that they take.
Well, I was going to say, I did double check this. Even though these are federal crimes and obviously were tried in a federal court, and thus you could be sent to a federal prison.
Yeah.
This is for people in Britain. This is where it gets a bit complicated. For trans people, well, depending on the state, even though this is a federal case, depending on the state, there is a danger from state to state for trans people to be sent to a male prison.
Yeah, and it's going to vary from one prison to the next as well.
Yeah, this is what's fucked up. Trans women are women. They should be sent to women prison. Yeah.
If one day I have to deal with that, then I will deal with that. But I don't think that's going to be a concern for me.
Yeah. So now,
but you're not wrong. I mean, the Department of Justice, or whatever freaking department it is, Department of Prisons, who knows, right? The U.S. government has tens of thousands of these. Recently said that trans people should be sent to the prisons of the gender with which they identify. Whether or not that's actually going to change anything, it's unclear. And whether or not that would have any bearing on my case whatsoever, I'm glad I didn't have to stay in jail, but at the same time, I'm curious what they would have done if I had been forced to stay in jail, because they couldn't have kept me in medical forever, right? Allegedly, they did that because everyone has to be quarantined for 14 days when they're brought into the jail to make sure they didn't have COVID-19 or whatever. But after 14 days, what would they have done with me? And, there are plenty of ways they could have quarantined me without putting me in medical, right? They certainly had the space for that.
Yeah. How much have you had any support from the LGBTQ community?
Not that I'm aware of. Like I said, my ability to browse the internet is extremely limited. So if, the LGBT community on Reddit or whatever is out there talking about me, I don't really have any way of accessing that or learning about it unless someone were to tell me about it.
I did contact Pink News, and you know what Pink News are like. weren't
Yeah.
interested. And I
I'm
kind
not
of thought,
surprised. A lot of media
well,
outlets are waiting until the trial is closer.
well, yeah, yeah, but the point is that the Pink News had there was a case down in Georgia of a trans woman who ended up in a male prison, and I kind of thought, hold on a moment, there's a danger that you could end up in a male prison. Isn't this the kind of thing that Pink News speaks out against? Um, but they didn't seem interested. I mean, I've done, I've tried to speak up for you as much as I can. You know, I don't think, and to be honest, you were selling, you shouldn't be going to fucking prison just because you didn't get the right fucking permit to sell Bitcoin, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, here's the thing. The federal government doesn't recognize Bitcoin as legitimate currency. So what's the fucking, deal with having to have a license?
Well, it's unclear where cryptocurrency and Bitcoin stands with the government, and of course, they're treating it essentially the same way they're treating marijuana, which is that it exists in this legal gray area that they're going to spin in whatever way benefits them. So if you ask the IRS, Bitcoin is an asset subject to taxes from capital gains. If you ask the US courts, they've been pretty clear that Bitcoin is money. But then again, there's this huge conflict between the IRS and with the US courts about what this stuff even is. And neither of them seem willing to rectify that because it benefits both of them. When they want to make money off of it, it's an asset. When they want to prosecute peaceful people, it's a currency. So they contradict themselves, they lie, and they mislead people. And the ambiguity in the law should favor the defendants. That's always been the precedent. And the law is plenty ambiguous in regard to cryptocurrency. I mean, we have literal government agencies saying it's an asset. What more do you want from me?
And I mean, the other thing is, I've seen the accusations that the Satanic Reformed Church was just a scam. I have spent many hours speaking to you about Satanism. It's not a scam. You are the real fucking deal.
Yeah, when I was at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, someone actually pointed out to me that Satanism is a denomination of Christianity. And I had never thought about it like that. But I mean, he's ultimately correct. I prefer not to think about it that way. But yes, this time last year, I was hosting a bake sale with the Extra Life Foundation here in Keene in order to raise money for the Boston Children's Hospital. The Extra Life event, also raising money for the same organization, took place here at the Reformed Satanic Church. We acted as a food bank last year when the food bank in Keene closed because of COVID-19. And we were like, look, a lot of people just lost their jobs. And now you're saying you're going to close down your food pantry for them. Well, we're going to open ours then. So, and not to mention for a while, I don't know what the final numbers were, but the Reformed Satanic Church was the number 2 donor to the Extra Life organization in the state of New Hampshire, second only to Walmart.
Right.
And I mean, there was a huge fucking gap between Walmart and the Reformed Satanic Church, but we were still number 2.
Yeah. So, as I say, I don't think, I just think the FBI have overreacted, and this is just bullshit. Sorry, just do. And I'm somebody on the left. Okay.
Sure.
I've seen the accusations that Ian scammed somebody. However,
well, the FBI.
Well, no. This was in one of the local newspapers. I remember. I remember I mentioned it to you. Obviously, you couldn't see it, but there was some accusation that some pensioner had been scammed by Ian, which is just bullshit. Because if you go and look at the Free Talk Live archives, you will find an entire episode where Ian spoke to someone who had been scammed,
Yeah.
by someone else and advise people how not to be scammed.
Yep. I
So
mean, the thing about these scams, though, is that once a person is like emotionally invested in a thing, the sunken cost fallacy sort of takes over, and they just sink more and more money into it. And these people who are caught up in these scams, they will lie. They will say, "Oh yes, I've met this person that I'm trying to send money to," even though they haven't. It's like, okay, well, what what can a person do if a scam victim is lying to them about having even met the other person? It's absolutely insane. But even the prosecutors have admitted that, there was no agreement, there was no conspiracy, there was no collusion between any of these alleged scammers out there and Ian Freeman. So they've admitted that.
yeah, the one thing I do remember I said to you afterwards that I saw the Crypto 6 website they put up. And I have to admit, I said, it's not exactly, enticing people to support them. It's
No,
very,
it needs a lot of work done to it, and unfortunately, I'm probably best suited to do that work, but I can't legally do it,
yeah.
and the other people who are suited to do it are just too busy to. But yeah, it needs an about page so that people can learn about the people who were arrested. It needs all sorts
And
of
they
work
need
done.
to put you at the center because as I've said before, as well as being a libertarian, you're trans, you can get LGBTQ. Because believe me, I have spoken to other LGBTQ people about your case, and I've all
Yeah.
some of them have said, "Oh, there's something a bit fishy here," blah de blah de blah. But they've always said you do not. But ultimately, they are scared about you being sent to a male prison. That's what they were scared of, and they do object to that. So.
Sure.
There is at least that, level of respect from LGBTQ people, as definitely should be, shall I say. And it's a shame that not more LGBTQ people have supported you.
Well, there's a very weird phenomenon here in the world where
I'm just going to interject here because I'm going to say, but this is not the first time this has fucking happened to you, right? I remember when you were running as sheriff, right?
Yeah.
You told me that the local LGBTQ pack refused to support you, despite the fact it was nonpartisan and it, had supported LGBTQ candidates from who were both Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, they did.
But, also, you told me that there is this suspicion that because you ran as sheriff, that you were somewhat targeted.
Well, I mean, look at it from the FBI's point of view, right? If you take out the 7,000 votes that got counted for Eli Rivera that didn't exist but were due to a clerical error, I got roughly 30% of the vote. That's got to be scary to the FBI and to the federal government when I was standing there running on the campaign that, yes, the FBI won't be welcome in Cheshire County. And the sheriff, as the highest law enforcement official in the county, can actually do that, right? The sheriff was here. Eli Rivera himself was actually here at my house the day of the race. So he sort of gave me the middle finger. But yeah, they were probably scared, What if Aria runs again? And what if she's successful in becoming sheriff? Then we can never cross into Cheshire County without getting arrested. So, I mean, it certainly shook up the establishment, right? I mean, it made international headlines. A lot of people paid attention to it. There's no way they missed it. And if all of this is true about the federal government and their desire to control and things like that, then there's every reason to believe that they would be on alert, that they would be motivated to act. In fact, the Keene Sentinel ran an article about me exactly 6 months prior to the raid, where I listed my public service as distributing Bitcoin to help defund the war machine. 6 months to the day later, the FBI raided my house and arrested me. Right. So I don't know that my sheriff campaign had any impact on what they were doing, but it's not unthinkable to believe that it did.
I was I was going to say, talking about you'll run for sheriff. I remember the first story I saw was in the Mail Online about it. So yeah,
What's in the where?
it was the Mail Online, which is a British
Oh, okay.
publication. That was the first story I saw.
Fox News were the ones who broke it. Amazingly enough, everyone else was just like, nothing weird's happening, and Fox News was like, oh yeah, hey, by the way, this happened. So all credit to Fox News for making that blow up the way that it did.
Yeah. I mean, we have to. One thing I wanted to talk to you about. It's kind of prophetic. This. I remember the very first conversation we ever had. I talked to you about a rant you had at Pork Fest about, shall we say, people who are into BDSM turning up to Pride parades.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discussion now about the inclusion of kink in Pride.
Yeah, I've noticed. And my perspective on that is I don't see any particular reason that it should be included, but I'm also not a fan of excluding people who want to be there. But kink doesn't seem to really have anything to do with gender or sexual identity or with sexual orientation. So I don't know.
But people who are into kinky stuff are marginalized. I mean,
sure.
I'm going to be talking about it. There was a kid at I went to boarding school, right? And as soon as the lights went out, right, you heard this noise.
Right.
Rustling under the sheets, right? Okay. There was a kid who got caught masturbating with a pair of washing up gloves on. And other kids did not let them live it down. Let's just say that. And I was one of the bullies as well. I'll admit.
Sure. I mean, we've all done things we regret.
And I just feel that we, particularly trans people, forget our own history if we marginalize people who are, have kinks.
Well, I agree they shouldn't be marginalized, but if LGBTQ pride is going to be expanded to include kink, then add a K to the hold on, the cat is over here stepping on buttons. Then add a K to the alphabet soup, basically. Well, in and of itself, lesbianism, bisexualism, transgenderism, being gay, none of these really have anything to do innately with kink. If we want to include kink, that's fine. Well, let's add a K to it then. But let's not pretend that, being gay or being trans or being bisexual necessarily is the same thing as one's sexual desires.
Sure. I just, as I say, I just remember the history of trans people in that after the Stonewall riots, which kickstart civil rights movement for LGBTQ people, trans people were thrown under the bus.
Sure. I mean, trans people are getting thrown under the bus right now.
Lesbian and gay people didn't think that they would be taken seriously if they took on trans people as well. This is why up until 2014, Stonewall did not actually officially advocate for trans people.
Sure.
So I just feel look, it's harmless. Look, so what? People are into PVC and harnesses and butt plugs. I don't, what's the problem? They're not doing anyone any harm.
I agree. It just doesn't have anything. I mean, you can be kinky and be just completely straight.
Yeah. Oh, it's not.
And just because you're trans doesn't mean you're kinky. If we're going to have kink pride, then we should actually include it and LGBTQIK or whatever.
But you see, you then get to sort of like things like cross-dressers, right? Now, cross-dressers obviously fall under the trans umbrella, but technically, they're fetishists. So it's kink. So you don't know where the line is drawn. I mean, a few years ago, Pride in London, were actually considering banning drag queens from the Pride parades. I mean, I just thought that was ridiculous. You do have your issues with Pride Month. I don't want to speak for you, but I do want to hear what you have to say because I do think it's worth hearing.
I don't have any desire to say it, though.
Okay, fine, fair enough. Though I will say this: the problem I have sometimes with Pride Month, sure, it's good to draw attention to LGBTQ civil rights, but it's not just the month of June. It's
right.
It's got to be every month. It's got to be every day that you go out and say, LGBTQ people deserve civil rights. And right now in the United States, particularly when it comes to trans people, their civil rights are, constantly under threat.
Yeah, it's really annoying. And the best thing that Facebook ever does for my mental health is ban me for 30 days. And they do that regularly. Thank God for that, because it keeps me off of Facebook, where the overwhelming majority of people are just arguing about my existence. And I don't care if they're allies. I don't care. Right? They're not helping, in my opinion, they're not helping my mental health by creating these posts about how trans women are women just so that all of these conservatives can come out of the woodwork and argue with them. I appreciate the sentiment, but just let me fucking live my life. Just let me exist in peace. It's just like all of the video streams that I do, they're all just constantly being inundated, just flooded with these comments of, is that a man with red hair? Is that a man in a dress? It's like, dude, why the fuck can't a trans person just do a show on the internet that almost never even talks about trans issues without people zeroing in on that one specific characteristic? Can we talk about what I'm actually talking about? Can we talk about anything that's going on in the world? Or are you just going to focus on this one little detail that doesn't have anything to do with the show? It's exhausting. And if it's not that, it's people on the right. Cat, stop stepping on buttons. I had them broken of the habit of walking across my mixer, and then I got a puppy, and they forgot how to behave.
Was that the puppy I saw in the photos from?
Yes.
It's really cute.
Yeah, she's adorable, lazy.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I mean, she's a golden retriever, so she's supposed to sleep like 18 to 20 hours a day.
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying. I do hear that from other trans women, fun enough.
Yeah, like one of my favorite shows is Aqua Teen Hugger Force, and there's a shit posting group for the show on Facebook, and it just immediately someone posted some anti-trans nonsense, and then like the next 500 posts were people who were posting pro-trans stuff and I, a trans person, when there's like, look, can we just have an Aqua Teen Hugger Force shit posting group without arguing about my existence? I appreciate the sentiment and I appreciate that you support me, but you're not helping by constantly making sure that this argument is being thrown in my face. And all of the other trans people in the group came along with like, yeah, absolutely. They're loving the posts, commenting that they agreed. But all of the allies out there, they just couldn't fucking take what I had just said. They're like, oh, she's got to stand up and fight for you. But she's making life harder for actual trans people who are just trying to live our lives. Stop feeding the trolls. Stop arguing with the conservatives. Just let us live our lives.
Yeah, I think we've had this discussion before. I think you've mentioned to me in the past that I spend way too much time paying attention to the likes of Blair White. I don't anymore, funny enough.
Well, that's good. I don't pay any attention to her.
It's not worth it. the reason I speak up for LGBTQ people is I do see, our rights under threat.
Sure.
And I feel that someone needs to go into bat for us.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't speak up for LGBTQ people. Obviously, I speak up against racism and general fascism.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm intersectional. I mean, for
Well,
instance,
in my opinion, I don't fail to speak up for trans people or anything like that, right? I have a national radio show that's on close to 200 radio stations, and I am a trans person. The way I choose to approach my trans activism is by like just existing and doing my thing as a trans person and making people have to deal with me and what I'm talking about instead of the fact that I'm trans, making them accept me as an equal instead of arguing that they should.
And you do get, I have to admit, I've heard a few callers, and you even get with some respect from Scott the Bigot.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good way of reaching people, right? I mean, he's still a bigot, but there are glimpses of humanity still within inside of him. Like, I think one of his calls to me, we categorized as Shemale versus Nazi round 3, because he was talking about, segregating LGBTQ people. And I was like, well, what about me, Scott? What if I don't want to be segregated? And he just stopped in his tracks and wasn't able to answer because he had finally come face to face with the actual consequences of the horrible things that he was talking, or that he wanted to see. And of course, that wasn't lasting. A few days later, he was right back to just being Scott the Bigot. But for just a moment, he was an actual human being. He had put aside the bigotry and recognized the humanity of myself and within himself. Maybe one day, the further this goes on, the more I continue asking him these difficult questions, he will drop the bigotry entirely. That's the goal.
Yeah, and I have to say, I do think you're a great advocate for trans people. Seriously, I do. I think you're far more articulate than I am, and far more intelligent as well, I'd say.
I don't know about that.
Plus, also, you're far more better looking than me. But yeah, I am a bit jealous of you.
Sorry.
Though, I have to admit, if I was 20 years younger, I would definitely, I'd have a swagger like you. But unfortunately, I didn't come out until I was 36. So, yeah.
I mean, that's one of the worst things about being trans, right? Is wishing. This is why I don't celebrate my birthday, because every year of my life was ultimately a year that I couldn't be the person that I wanted to be. And because it took me so many years to erase the Christian brainwashing and the repression that they forced me to throw upon myself, it was, in my mid-20s before I finally came out and started being able to pursue it. And now I look back, I was like, they didn't just steal those first 16 years from me that I was a Christian. No, they took the next 10 years as well, as I was still unraveling all of the brainwash and all of the self-hate that they had forced upon me. And because of that, they took the rest of my life from me, because I couldn't just transition at the age of 16 or 15 or whatever. All the signs were fucking there, but they obviously, fundamentalist Christians from Mississippi, they weren't going to allow it. But all of the signs were fucking there. It was obvious if that had happened today, the resources are there now for trans teens. But, when I was 14 or 15, they just weren't. The only thing anyone knew of in that cultural landscape about, quote, trans people was from shemale porn.
Well, yeah.
So the terminology wasn't there. No one knew anything about it. It didn't even seem then like something that was actually pursuable, even though that's just because of the religious right and how they had kept all of these things from being pursuable for the average person. They're like, oh, but no, the numbers of trans people are just steadily going up. And the best analogy I've seen of this are left-handed memes. As soon as we stopped punishing people for trying to write left-handed, the number of left-handed people went up. It's not because society influenced them into being left-handed. It's because, no, we finally allowed them to write with the hand that they wanted to write with. So obviously, the number of left-handed people went up, because the number of people we were forcing to write like a right-handed person when they were in fact left-handed went down. And we see the same thing now. Now that we're not forcing people to carry on cisgender lives, the number of trans people are going up. That should tell people how many people have been fucked over by the United States religious apparatus that is the Republican and conservative parties.
Well, I was gonna say that states like Mississippi and Arkansas are banning trans youth getting treatment, and I
saw that coming. They've been, Mississippi in particular has been on their way to being a theocracy for a long time.
Yeah, Arkansas though seems to be, and Tennessee seems to be the most radical of the states.
Yes, the three states in the tri-state area that I've from and lived in, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Arkansas, by far the most. Even Alabama isn't as extreme, but Mississippi, Tennessee, and Arkansas, yeah,
I don't know if
they are vicious.
Yeah, I mean, states like Georgia and Alabama, I'm wondering because, so not Alabama, Louisiana, sorry. The main reason those two states, Louisiana and Georgia, is that there's a big LGBTQ community in Atlanta, and there's a big LGBTQ community in New Orleans, and well, those are people who vote, so politicians will be wary of that. That is the good power of democracy. I'd add. Doesn't always work in our favor. Not in Arkansas, it doesn't.
No, but that's because there's no LGBTQ representation in Arkansas. The vast majority of people are terrified of being considered bisexual or gay or even lesbian in a lot of these places. But trans is, no, that's not okay. It's not going to fly over there well. You will get attacked.
Yeah, I was going to explain something which has been happening over here to you. I wanted to get your read on this. So, obviously, you might know that there's been the European Football Championships going on here, or you might not.
I did not.
And anyways, and England have been doing quite well.
Okay.
Anyways, there were some teams. Now, the way they've organised this championship, usually you'll get one host country, or sometimes two countries will host it, right? But this time, what they've done is they've held the matches across the continent because it's a celebration of 60 years of the European Championships, right? So some of the matches have been held in places like Poland and Hungary and Russia, which are very anti-LGBTQ, right?
It also seems unwise to do this immediately after a pandemic and the surge of the Delta variant, but I guess they're going to do what they want.
Well, there's a lot of money at stake. Okay,
yeah.
Football's soccer, as you would call it, is a big business.
I don't call it soccer. I call it football because I love pissing off Americans by calling what they call football rugby or rugby football. They fucking hate that.
Well, American, I refer to American football as rugby for wimps.
Rugby what?
Rugby for wussies.
I just call it a rugby football, and they don't know how to deal with that. You mean what is that? Soccer? No, soccer's football. The NFL is rugby football. They just Americans, man, and their egotism. They just have. It's just impossible for them to recognize that what they consider to be football is not what anyone else in the whole fucking world considers to be football.
Anyways, so as I say, they were hosting some of these games in Russia and Hungary and Poland. Now, here's something really awful in Poland. The Polish government has been bragging about how it has LGBTQ-free zones. That sounds ominous to me.
Yeah, that sounds pretty bad.
Anyways, so
Russia itself is trying hard to be an LGBTQ-free zone.
Yeah,
they haven't made it illegal to be gay, but it's illegal to basically talk about it or to have pride about it or to do it publicly.
So UEFA, who are the federation who organised this, basically have been accused of turning a blind eye to homophobia. Basically, essentially helping to endorse homophobia, because the other problem with this, right, is that because it was being held in Pride Month, various companies want to use the rainbow flag as advertising on the side of the pitch, right?
Sure.
And so when the games have been held here and in Germany, that has happened, right? But in Hungary, no, can't do that. They want to piss off the Hungarians. No, fuck it. They're the ones who are the homophobes. They're the ones who want to persecute people for something which they can't help. And so, and it gets worse because FIFA, who are the world governing bodies, who have they awarded the next World Cup to? Qatar, who have got not just a dreadful record when it comes to LGBTQ rights, but a dreadful human rights record. Period. So, I know people say, "Oh, politics and sport don't mix." Bollocks. I grew up in South Africa. I fully well would know that politics and sport do, collide.
Well, the issue is, they're going to collide because the state, ultimately does what it does. But if FIFA has the World Cup in Qatar, then that's going to generate a lot of tourism, and it's going to give the Qatar government more money with which to oppress LGBTQ people. So there's really no way of separating it out, saying, "Oh, well, it's not political," but it is, because you're therefore funding oppression of LGBTQ people. Just like people say, "Oh, I love Chick-fil-A," but it's not because of their anti-gay activism or anything like that. I don't care. You're buying a hate chicken sandwich, and that's all there is to it. You're giving them money that they're using to fund things like conversion therapy organizations and lobbyists to lobby for the legalization of conversion therapy. That chicken sandwich isn't worth it. That World Cup viewership isn't worth it. Find somewhere else.
And so the other thing is that England players have been taking the knee, right, before matches, because a lot of the squad is black, right? Okay. But it's now obviously everyone seems to think this comes. It was started by Black Lives Matter, but it sort of has become sort of like, not just to do with anti-racism, but anti-homophobia and anti-ableism. But of course, every time they do this, the England fans, who tend to be the most hardcore of England fans, I hate to say this, do tend to be racist. They're what you would call gammon, what you would call rednecks, and
that's how it is with rugby football here in the United States as well. Generally speaking, there are some people who are really big fans of it who aren't racist. Like one of my friends is one of these such people. But by and large, the sporting events, for whatever reason, they seem to have the most passionate fans drawn from the right wing. I don't know why that is, but
it's nationalism. It's because the right and the whole. Lawrence Fox and Paul Joseph Watson are two far right, talking head arseholes. They've been down on the England team, hoping they're going to lose because, hey, members of the England squad support tolerance and diversity. Hold on, I thought you meant to be a patriot. Aren't patriots meant to support the country no matter what? So. And of course Boris Johnson is using this to basically push his odious far right agenda.
They always do.
Yeah, and if I was to be honest, one thing I've sort of got from sort of something which is your cynicism towards politicians has certainly rubbed off on me. The Tories keep saying that they're going to ban conversion therapy, but they've been saying this for 3 fucking years. And the excuse is, Brexit, COVID, Brexit, COVID, Brexit, COVID. You've been doing other shit in Parliament. It doesn't take that much amount of time to get a fucking piece of legislation through, to ban fucking conversion therapy.
It shouldn't, at the very least. But I need to take a break and take the dog out so she can pee and have a cigarette.
All
You
right.
want to pause recording for a moment, or
Yeah, sure.
well, I
sure.
guess you can edit later. It doesn't matter. Either way, I'll be back in a few minutes.
Okay, hon. And we're back. Yes, the power of editing. I was going to ask you because you have a this is why I like you, because you have a completely different perspective, right? On from many trans women I know in America, because many trans women will support the Democrats. Okay,
Sure.
I've met one. In fact, actually, the very first I have to tell you this story. The very first trans woman I knew in the United States was a trans woman called Stevie, and she was a conservative libertarian, right? And anyways, I got we got to know one another, and I was chatting with her one night, and she said we're talking about music, and she said, "Well, what have you been listening to?" I said, "Oh, it's a band you won't know. It's a band called New Model Army, who are sort of a British folky punk rock band,
Okay.
who actually were barred entry to the United States in the 1980s because they wrote a song called 51st State, which was basically slagging off the United States. And she, so somewhat left wing, okay? And she suddenly pipes up and she says, "Oh, Thunder and Consolation is my all-time favorite album." I went, "What?" She went, "Yeah, New Model Army, they're brilliant." Sorry, you're a conservative libertarian who likes a militantly socialist band. Turned out that when she was at college, the college radio used to play a lot of their stuff. So she got into them. It was a really big surprise to me. But, I do like diversity of opinion. And so most trans women I know in America will support the Democrats, right?
Sure.
Maybe one or two will support the Greens. But you are obviously ostensibly an anarcho-capitalist, but anarchist. I think you prefer the term, don't you, anarchist?
I prefer the term voluntarist. I when I'm trying to get attention, I use the words that are most likely to shock people, to jar people, like how I used to call myself, the anarchist shemale. Well, I haven't done that in a very long time, and it's because it's not helpful to me or to my goals to shock people in those ways anymore. It may have been at the time. I don't know. Hindsight, is 2020, as they say, but it certainly isn't a way to achieve my current goals. Using the word anarchist is one way of achieving those goals, but strictly speaking, really, I'm a voluntarist, which just means that I believe that all interactions between people should be done with the consent of the involved parties. They should be voluntary interactions.
So you come from the whole LGBTQ rights, from a very different perspective from many people. So what would you say to trans people about how they should win respect and equality?
That's a difficult question.
Yeah.
Realistically, we can either have someone's pity or their respect. As far as I can tell, these things are mutually exclusive, and a lot of just minorities in general try to take the pity approach that, oh, you should feel sorry for us and help us. Okay, I mean, that's good, and it's good that people get that help, but someone who's helping you, someone who takes pity on you, can't respect you. I would rather achieve the goals of equality and all that by forcing these people to respect us. And I've done this at least on a small scale, where people come onto the video streams and that they want to hate me, but after an hour of throwing insults at me or whatever, and me just shrugging it off and just continuing to do what I do, eventually I'm like, okay, well, I just have to respect you then. And to me, that's the best way of achieving equality without ever arguing with them about human rights or whether or not I deserve equal treatment. I just carry on doing what I do until they respect me as a person. After that, it doesn't matter what characteristics I have, they respect me.
Yeah. I kind of think that we need to dispel the bullshit which TERFs peddle about us. That's kind of what I kind of, I mean, what TERFs peddle about us are absolute lies. Fallacies, that
Sure.
we want access to all female to female only spaces so that we can, have our wicked way. Can, not obviously taking into consideration what anti-androgens and fucking hormones do to you,
Right.
you. And so I kind of feel that it is display and demonstration. This is why I really think trans visibility is so important. We need to be seen. I was reminded the other day, when I first tried to come out, that back in the early noughties, the mantra then was, you did everything you could do to pass. There's an old term. And after you had surgery, you bunkered down and lived in stealth. And I was kind of one of the first trans women who went, no, because you're always complaining that, the society doesn't understand trans people. And the only way society is going to understand trans people is if they see us and hear us.
Well, transitioning is a process, right?
Yeah.
Everyone has to start somewhere. My take on this is unusual, and most people don't agree with me. But I think that it's important. The best thing we can do for a trans person's mental health is to allow them to transition. And it's my general. Every individual is unique, certainly, but I have a hard time believing that my referring to a person as she because she's a trans woman when she has a full-on beard is not helping her mental health, and that she would probably be better served by shaving that beard. But every person is unique, and that's just my perspective on it. I know that it's far more helpful to my mental health to have a good image of myself, to look in the mirror and be like, okay, it's not bad, than it is for Mark Edge or whoever to refer to me as she. To me, it means more to me how I feel about me than what other people feel about me. And there's nothing that they can say or do to affect how I feel about me.
Yeah, you seem to take the egoism type approach, self-confidence. And I think that is key. And I think this is why, as I say, this is why I think you're an important voice, and I do genuinely mean you are, and I think you are an important trans voice, because so many trans people, I've had my problems with the trans community over the years. I've been in conflict with them over, for instance, a few years ago there was an issue with there was this newspaper called The News of the World, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch. And they got caught phone hacking people's private, voicemail messages.
Sure.
And there was a big inquiry into this, and Murdoch was dragged in front of Parliament and whatever else. And basically the conclusion was that the press needed to be regulated. And of course, all the trans people went along with this. And I went, no, you don't want to do that. I lived in South Africa, where during apartheid, the press was heavily regulated, and there was one newspaper just to say how pissed off they were about all the fucking government authoritarian measures that were clamping down on the press, actually printed a blank page as their front page as a means of protesting.
Nice.
So, I believe in the fourth estate. I believe that the press, most of the stuff the press publish is shit. I'm not going to deny that, right? But occasionally, you do get, Woodward and Bernstein, right? You do get the Boston Globe, investigating, pedophilia in the Catholic Church. You get that, and that's why you need freedom of the press, right?
Yeah.
And of course, all the trans people go, we're targeted by the press and whatever. I go, yeah, I know that's wrong, And what you need to do is you need to infiltrate the press and write articles yourselves. And then, I knew that would happen eventually, right?
Sure.
But I'm not going to throw freedom of the press under the bus because it's an important component to democracy.
No, I agree entirely. And it relates to so much to what has gone in my life. Like this year, I just came back from the Porcupine Freedom Festival and from Pork Fest, which is a libertarian festival here in New Hampshire. And the first year I went there, it was with Muslims for Liberty, and everyone was very nice to me, but everyone was also very caught off guard by this sudden appearance of this trans person. And a lot of these people are, conservative, libertarian leaning conservatives. So they were uncomfortable and stuff like that. But by regularly just appearing over the years, the libertarians just kept giving me a bigger and bigger platform until now I'm, hosting the largest libertarian radio show in the US 4 nights a week. And this year was the year that I was on stage judging the rant competition. You'd mentioned the rant earlier where I was talking about kink. That was my first that was everyone's first experience with me at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. And this year I was a judge in that very same event. So that's absolutely the best way of, in my opinion, of propelling trans rights forward is just being a trans person who does stuff, who can't be ignored.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you are bang on there. Anyways, I have to go.
I probably do as well.
It's lovely talking to you. Anyways, I just got to end the show with my normal shill. If you like this video, then please give it a like. If you like what we have to say here, then please share it with your on your social media timelines. If you got any feedback, please do leave us a comment. And most important of all, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you for joining us yet again, Ari. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me on.
And I will put up this video in the next couple of days. Take care of yourselves, and fingers crossed for you, hon.
Thank you.
With your legal battles. Oh, and also, do you want to quickly give your GoFundMe a plug?
Yeah, it's help.ariadimezzo.com. It's spelled right behind me on the wall there. Help.ariadimezzo.com. That'll take you straight to the GoFundMe.
I will stick a link to that down below.
And it needs some clarification. At the moment, it's written as though it's for legal defense specifically. I've learned that is not exactly the case. So the blurb there needs to be rewritten. So don't take the actual text as binding. It was written poorly.
All right. Well, look, you take care of yourselves, and thank you for joining me. All right.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.